Good morning, afternoon, and evening Congress attendees. Welcome to the opening ceremony of the 18th Asia Pacific Congress of Clinical Microbiology and Infection, APCCMI 2021, here in Singapore. This is our first hybrid event, hence I would like to welcome our colleagues and friends who are joining us from all over the world. And we have a fully packed program over the next 3 days, and we hope you'll be fully engaged here and via the virtual platform. We begin our day with a welcome speech from the President of Society of Infectious Disease Singapore and Chair of Organizing Committee, APCCMI, Associate Professor David Lai. Professor Lai, please.
Welcome, everyone. I'm sure you guys can appreciate how stressful it is to organize an in-person Congress, especially after the arrival of Delta. I'm very glad today we had the opening ceremony, and we have been graced by Senior Minister of State, Dr. Janil Puthucheary. Online with us as well are a few VIPs, Professor Kenneth Park, Director of Medical Services, Professor Chong Yap Sing, Dean Yong Lin School of Medicine, as well as Professor Teo Yik Ying, Dean Sok Swee Hock School of Public Health. I will give you a brief background on the APCCMI. So this is the biannual Congress of the Asia Pacific Society of Clinical Micro and Infection, which is a federation of societies of microbiology and infectious disease in the Asia Pacific region. Our main activity, other than the Congress, is a Journal of Global Antimicrobial Resistance, as well as the APSCMI Institute Mario Young University Award since 2018. This is the EXCO members, which who come from different countries in Asia Pacific. We'll work better on gender diversity for the future. So I apologize for that. And we have been organizing the APCCMI, the first one in 1989, as the Western Pacific Congress of Chemotherapy and Infectious Diseases, which changed its name to APCCMI in Beijing 2012. So it's every 2 years. And this is the 18th APCCMI in Singapore, the third time we're organizing it. The society that organizes this is the Society of Infectious Disease Singapore. The reason why I put Professor Feng Baoshi here is that he is the founding president. He was the founding president of the society. He was also the first organizing chairman of WPCCID 1996. So the society has a biannual Montero lecture to honor Professor Montero and his son, Dr. Edmund Montero, an annual practice update for infectious disease in Singapore, again, the SIDS Institute Mario Young University Award, an ID book prize for the best student in ID in the Yong Lin School of Medicine. We also fund hospitals in their activities for the World Antibiotic Awareness Week, and we also have a handbook on adult vaccination in Singapore since 2016. So this is the committee, again, from different hospitals in Singapore, a mix of microbiologists and infectious disease physicians, and gender diversity is better here. So the 18th APCMI will have 10 plenaries, 25 symposia, and 2 oral presentations. We have 78 speakers from 15 countries, as well as 55 moderators from 5 countries. We tried very hard to have a balanced agenda, but it's 28% among the faculty and 40% among the moderators. So as of yesterday, we have 1,251 delegates from 36 countries. And you can see that Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, China, Hong Kong, SAR, India, Indonesia, Philippines, all have very high representation. Thank you for your support. Otherwise, the conference will not be able to happen. So in person, we are limited by Singapore Tourism Board to 250. We have 124 delegates. Speakers and moderators are included. So we are limited. So hopefully we'll have around 100 persons here in this very big hall, and safe management measures will be extremely safe. I know a lot of my colleagues are worried about coming here in person, but we are all fully vaccinated and we have space, we are very socially distanced. There are 222 abstracts as well as 10 oral presentations. So once again, I thank my committee, again from different public institutions in Singapore, who have been working very hard in the last 1.5 years. And also, this won't happen without the support of industry, and they're all listed here. Please visit them online, as well as in the very spacious exhibitors area according to your timing. So just a reminder, this is a hybrid symposium, and you can interact with speakers, delegates, and sponsors online via the virtual 3D conference platform. The headphones on your table, and you can select channels based on different concurrent sessions. So the color is in front of you on that standee on the table. There's also dedicated times for each zone for you to visit exhibitors. There's no mingling across tables and zones, so please. And if the safe distancing ambassadors remind you, please politely obey, don't challenge them. And there's also no eating during lectures. We have dedicated time for coffee breaks and lunch. So thank you very much. Please enjoy APCMI, and I'll see you guys on Saturday for the Best Oral Presentation Award, the Young Investor Award, as well as a handover ceremony to APCMI 2023 in Busan, Korea. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, David, for that introduction. I feel like I must apologize for my gender, you know. Next time, let me know in advance. I'll substitute one of my colleagues who are more than capable of representing. But thank you very much for the invitation. Some of you will know that as a result of my past life, this is not my first clinical conference, academic conference that I've been to. However, I'm now wearing a different hat, so I'm a little bit less worried as to whether or not I have any CME points for attending. More worried about whether it's okay for me to take off my mask, but I suspect this is the event with the best infection control in the whole of Singapore today, given the attendees. But conferences like this have been going on for as long as we've had academic clinical practice, and it has highlighted the importance of academic exchange across institutions, across healthcare systems, and across borders. And the fact that today, notwithstanding all our safe management measures, the need to do this partly by Zoom, hybrid event, bringing people in from overseas online, it demonstrates our interest and our drive to keep up that spirit of academic cooperation across institution, across healthcare systems, across borders, collaboration in the interests of our patients and of our people. I think it also speaks to a certain hunger that we all have for social collaboration as humans, that whatever the problem may be, we tend to find opportunities and want to find opportunities to share best practices and learn from each other. And it has proven its worth. That spirit of academic collegiality, collaboration, clinical collaboration, has over many decades proven itself time and time again, not just for COVID-19, but for any number of diseases, infectious or otherwise. And in a way, if we are talking about COVID-19, today, nearly 2 years on, it feels overwhelming. It feels like we've been swimming in this for almost a lifetime, despite the fact that it's only been 2 years. One of the things we often have to remind ourselves of is what were things like pre-COVID-19? And especially, what were things like pre-COVID-19 that allowed us to deal with it in the way that we have? If we're honest, we didn't go into COVID-19 naive, either as a country or as a sort of global academic community. We were primed pre-pandemic as a result of any number of waves of emerging infectious diseases, the rising recognition of this as a problem from as early as the 70s, but really coming to prominence in the 90s. And then subsequently, the clinical experience and subsequent research that we did on SARS, H1N1, and other waves of infection. And every single one of these incidents resulted in a flurry of research, but also a huge effort in cross-border global cooperation, sharing best practices, sharing protocols, sharing information about the experience with patients, from some very fundamental scientific matters such as the sharing of genetic sequences so that people could develop primers and detection kits, all the way to prosaic measures such as PPE standards, operational protocols within hospitals, how to rapidly put together negative pressure isolation rooms and retrofit them into a brownfield site. These were all present, these were all things that we had operated, had some degree of practice, And so when we began to get worried about COVID-19, we had a certain context to be rightly concerned. But what we also had was a pre-existing culture of academic collaboration, a certain social expectation that in conducting research as faculty, in conducting your clinical practice within the public healthcare sector, there was a duty, not quite of care, but a duty of collegiality and collaboration in the interests of our society and our patients. The background to this also was altered by the accelerating technology transformation that we saw coming out of the mid-2020s. And certainly 2015 through to 2019, those 4 or 5 years, we saw huge and rapid change in what was possible on the back of technology. For all its ills, it allowed real-time or near real-time sharing of information. And to the point that we were also worried about the extent to which we were connected, and adverse events in one part of the world were creating resentment and sentiment halfway around the world. But that technological backbone, near real-time sharing of information, and doing so in a way that was verifiable, that was authenticated, was essential to how we were able to then start to respond to COVID-19 when it came onto the scene at the beginning of 2020. In near real time, the whole world began to learn about what was happening. Of course, there were information gaps, but compared to our past experience in these other diseases that I've talked about, it was fundamentally different. The genetic sequence was shared so early that people were building detection kits long before the first case had arrived on their island, around the world. This international collaboration, this extent to which we shared information, another great example was what happened with vaccine development. To go from that first series of detections at the beginning of 2020 through the rapid development, primary basic research, safety testing, clinical trials, and then deployment within a year. Much has been said, much has been written, but I think it's yet another example of just how primed we were to be ready to collaborate on that scale and achieve such extraordinary outcomes. And that process hasn't stopped with the vaccines. We continue to have discussions about treatment algorithms. As a pediatric intensivist, one of my prior, I have to hedge my words here, as a prior and yet still licensed pediatric intensivist, one of my interests is the respiratory physiology, the extent to which high-flow nasal cannula oxygen, for example, is now been proving to be a game changer in the treatment of severely unwell COVID-19 patients. Unexpected, demonstrated, altering clinical practice in real time. This process has extended to the public policy realm as well. So today we are able to access data from around the world to inform our models, our predictions, to such a robust degree that when we are making policy and our scenario developments, we have a degree of confidence around some of the measures, some of the interventions that we have as a result of robust data from around the world. It has changed that practice of public health policy. And this extent of collaboration and collegiality, I think is one of those, perhaps one of those lessons, one of those things that we need to take away as a silver lining when we finally are approaching some degree of normalcy, and learn those lessons. Learn those lessons about how well we did, for all the problems, for all the missteps and difficulties, any number of issues all around the world. There were plenty of good lessons to be learned, especially for academic and clinical practice, and it informs how we should think of ourselves as a global community of practice going forward. This extent of collaboration was not just international. It happened on the local scale as well. And here in Singapore, we have been very fortunate that the academic faculty, many of whom are represented here today, have been actively involved in the public policy development, as well as the operational issues around our fight for COVID-19. Whether it's about the meetings and representations at the multi-ministry task force, whether it's about the relationship that informed ongoing research, both clinical and basic, the presence of faculty on advisory panels, and the engagement with the public, a very important part of generating that social support and cohesion that allowed us to address COVID-19 in the way that we did. There are many people here today who have become household names out there in the public eye, explaining different and difficult microbiological concepts, hygiene concepts, and taking our public health messaging out to the public with authority and credibility to the public. This collaboration also extended to the private sector. This wasn't just a government-academia approach. Clearly, the private sector had a very important role to play. If you look at the extent to which we were able to mobilize mass production, mass delivery, essential supplies, and ensuring that we had all our therapeutics available, the relationship that we had, the triangular relationship that we had, government, academia, and the private sector, based on many years of relationship and collaboration, was essential, and that we were able to then drive this process forward and bring things in, bring supplies in, ensure the supply chains were working well, and the products were available to the public. The story about the collaboration for the development of vaccines I've already touched on and is well known, but even prosaic things like our trace together tokens, they're now considered prosaic. When I come in and I scan, it's become just a normal fact of life, but just having those gateway boxes was a massive supply chain and logistics exercise requiring collaboration between the private sector and the government, and informed by a fair amount of academic research as well. So all of this, you can see I've repeatedly talked about collaboration and collegiality, is exemplified by coming together in a conference like this. But when we come together across institutions, across systems, and across borders to collaborate, there are, I think, two main purposes. One is to spark off innovation and new ideas, the cross-fertilization from people working at a problem from different angles or working in different disciplines. The other has to be, over some time, after some debate and a lot of discussion, some degree of convergence and consensus. And we all then agree to pull in a similar direction. You bring together distinguished speakers from all around the world, you share your ideas, not all of which are immediately compatible with each other, and then after a while we shape ourselves and develop some key consensus, COVID-19, public health policy, or today around microbiological threats. I don't have expertise in microbiology and the therapeutics. As a former pediatrician and pediatric intensivist, I suspect I annoyed many of my colleagues with referrals such as, please see to rule out possible cryptic zoonotic infection, or please see the rheumatologists tell me this is not an autoimmune disease, hence I assume it is infectious. But if I may, as a former clinician, suggest that looking at how well we have done, if I take a glass half full picture of COVID-19 and the lessons that we have learned, if I may suggest that we need to institutionalize and remember these lessons and apply them to some other areas going forward. We need to look at the importance of supply chains. What were the relationships, governance structures, and regulations that allowed those supply chains to function in the way that they did and give us the outcomes that they did? This was essential in COVID-19, and it will be essential for whatever the next emerging infection is. We need to learn the lessons about models of funding that worked well, especially around the delivery of public health care in the midst of a pandemic and an epidemic. We need to learn the lessons about the development and deployment of therapies, especially novel ones, and the need to continue to conduct clinical trials post-deployment, especially if those deployments were accelerated. The lessons learned in research and trials, I suspect, will be well written up and the subject of many, many papers in many journals for years to come. But I think there is another layer about information sharing well above the idea of publishing in peer-reviewed journals, which is how we have been able to utilize information sharing at the interface between clinical practice and public health policy. I think that is something that in COVID-19, we've learned great lessons, and we really must institutionalize to make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. But there is also the opportunity to apply these lessons to other diseases that we have been grappling with for decades, and perhaps pre-pandemic had a sense that we had achieved some kind of plateau or some kind of equilibrium, that we just had to coexist with this level of background, burden of disease and burden of care. But maybe we have learned some things in the last 2 years which will give us a renewed thrust to perhaps take new steps. Old diseases, ancient diseases like tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV, which was an emerging infectious disease several decades ago, but which we have now reached a new equilibrium with. Are there lessons from the COVID-19 fight which will then take us forward and allow us to do new and novel things to control these diseases? And these models of collaboration can also apply to areas where international communities of practice, such as yours, can think about regulation and governance in a way that will improve the health of our patients and our clients. And an example might be antimicrobial resistance, where again that sharing of information and rules of governance across institutions, across healthcare systems, and potentially around the world may benefit from lessons learned from COVID-19. So I think there's lots of exciting things ahead. Looking at your program, I suspect you will have a great conference with lots of insights shared, many interesting questions to be addressed, and I hope you all enjoy your CME points as well as this opportunity to get together as a community of practice. Congratulations to the Congress and to the Society for coming together and being able to continue the academic work and the practice of collaboration with partners and faculty here in Singapore as well as around the world. To the people logging on by Zoom from around the world, I hope one day that you'll have the opportunity to come and meet your colleagues here in Singapore. And if you do, it will be because of the progress that we have made in COVID-19 by faculty and colleagues such as yourselves. And for that, I thank you very much in advance. And congratulations, and have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Janil.